All right, guys. So previously, you were looking at this question with the study in the USA talking about how a greater provision of dentistry can decrease the rates of obesity. So hopefully, guys, the reason why E was the flaw in that made sense. Now, guys, we're going to move on to IMAT 2013 and the flaw question there, which is question 5. So it says, after looking at interviews conducted with a number of adult learners, our research suggested that the learners who felt that they were most successful were also highly motivated. We noticed that early success had heightened motivation in some cases, and saw that both success and motivation may be due to a special aptitude for learning. Then it says, we also noticed that many of those who felt they were most motivated were also learning in favorable conditions or for fun, which meant that they have become motivated since starting their classes. Though these conditions seem persuasive, the results led us to the same conclusion. It's impossible to learn anything without motivation. Then it says, which of the following is not a flaw in the above argument? So guys, pause the video, give yourself over a minute, use the skills we've seen in the previous questions to try to tackle this one. All right, guys, so welcome back. So remember, what you're trying to do is find the conclusion firstly, because remember, if you know the conclusion, you can more or less find what the assumption is, or in this case, there are quite a few assumptions here, but it's just good to find the conclusion anyway, just to give you a sense of what the argument is about. And here it's quite straightforward because it literally shows you this is the conclusion. So he's basically trying to say it's impossible to learn anything without motivation, and there's a lot of assumptions along the way, and we will see that in the options. But we're looking for which one is not a flaw. So there's going to be 4 flaws, and one of them is not a flaw. So A, it seems that those who thought they were successful actually were. Yeah, that's actually true because here it's because it's saying there was the researchers they were saying something along the lines of they done this research with learners and talking about success and motivation in the first sentence, but obviously you're assuming that they were actually telling you the truth, isn't it? So that's why this is a flaw, right? So that's why it can't be the answer, and also this is a flaw, hence why it can't be the answer because you're assuming whoever said they were motivated actually were, and whoever said they were successful actually were, but obviously you can't establish that from what we have. C, the research does not establish that there are no successful learners who lack motivation. This is also true. So a clear flaw in this argument is that it's just giving you the positive sides of what they're saying. It's not saying that, it's basically trying to put across the fact that, like, is basically trying to put forward the fact that to be, like, successful, right, you have to have motivation. So it's basically putting across the idea that if you if you don't have any motivation, right, it's basically saying kind of like it's impossible to learn anything. So that's why it can't be this one, because it doesn't give any example. D, the research is only concerned with adult learners. Yeah, exactly. So the conclusion is generalized, is based on anyone, but this whole thing that they're doing over here is based on adult learners. So you're basically generalizing this for the whole population, which is obviously going to be a flaw. So it can't be this one. So therefore, by elimination, should be E. But let's check that. It seems that in order to be motivated, you have to have a special aptitude for learning. Now, the reason why this is not a flaw is because it says, where is it? Yeah, it says here, uh, this may be due to a special aptitude for learning. It's not saying that that success and motivation is definitely associated with a special aptitude for learning. It's just saying it may be due to, whereas this says it's definitely due to, and it's clearly not saying that. So that's why this one would be our winner, and therefore why E would be the correct answer in this case. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense. And as always, we look forward to seeing you in the next video. All right, guys. So previously, you're looking at this question to do with study on adult learners, and it was making the conclusion that you had to be motivated to learn something. So hopefully, the reason why E was not the flaw in this case, guys, remember this is a very different type of question, and it really made obvious that it's looking for something which is not a flaw. Be careful for that, guys. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense. Next, we're going to move on to the same paper, question 17. So it says, according to a recent analysis of university entrance records, you are most likely to go to university if your name is John than if it is Wayne. Therefore, if you want your child to go to university, you're better off calling him John than Wayne. And then it says, which of the following is the best statement of the flaw in the above argument? So, guys, pause the video, give yourself just over a minute, be sure to be back after that, and then we can go through the answer. All right, guys. So this is a pretty short passage, so it's really easy to work with. But clearly, guys, here in this case, this is going to be your conclusion because you're having this, indication that is given its reasoning. Therefore, this is the conclusion. So basically, the conclusion here is that if you want your child to go to university, you should call him John rather than Wayne. And it's basically saying because from the analysis of records, there's more people that go to university that are called John rather than Wayne. Right. So this is a classic, guys, correlation and causation thing, isn't it? So without even us looking at the option, it's basically saying that you don't know, for example, it could just be the fact that the Johns that were in the university records were all smart, right? Or they, came from a private school or something like that. You're saying the thing which caused them to go to university was their name, but in fact, there's so many other things which could have caused them to go to university, such as their social status, such as so many factors, such as they might have a better teacher when they were younger, etc., etc. So this is clearly a D, isn't it? We'll go through the other options anyway, but this is pretty much D, and I'm pretty certain about that. Let's go for other. It draws a general conclusion from specific evidence. I mean, there's firstly, the evidence isn't uh, the evidence isn't really specific. As specific I'm getting the vibe that is like from a very certain university, but I think it just says a university entrance records. So it can't be this one. It confuses a necessary condition with a sufficient one. That's completely random. It can't be this one. So the difference between a necessary condition and a sufficient one. Necessary is you like you have to have that, but that's not the only thing you have to have. Sufficient is like if you just have that, you should be good. But this is that's just to go over the terms, but it doesn't have any implication here. It jumps to a conclusion without any evidence. That's garbage because it actually gives evidence from the university entrance records. So it can't be this. It fails to consider other names than Wayne or John. I mean, the conclusion is based on Wayne or John. Is not. He's not saying like John rather than any other name. So that's perfectly fine. So it can't be this one. So that's why E, guys, is the correct answer in this case. So a pretty straightforward one and a really good example of correlation causation case. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense. And as always, we look forward to seeing you in the next video. All right, guys. So previously, we considered this question, question 17, talking about university records, and I have a higher chance of getting to university if your name is John rather than Wayne. Hopefully, guys, that was a clear example of correlation and causation case, and hopefully that question has made sense. Now, guys, without further ado, we're going to move on to question 8. This is a nationwide survey showed that the majority of people who would not be willing to give up their car in favor of public transport. However, in a recent survey of people living in an area with heavy traffic problems, 76% say that they would prefer to travel to work by public transport if the system was made more reliable. This shows that the previous findings were wrong. We should therefore restrict car use and start a program of improving the nation's public transport network as soon as possible. And then, which of the following is the best statement of the flaw in the argument above? So, guys, give yourself just over a minute. Be sure to be back after that, and then we're going to go through the solution. All right, guys. So clearly, guys, in this case, the conclusion is quite evident. We have two indications: should and therefore. Therefore, essentially, what the conclusion is that we should restrict car use and start a program of improving public transport ASAP. Basically, that's the conclusion. And the evidence, more or less, the thing that's backing this up is this recent survey of people living in an area of high traffic problems, right? So that's going to be our evidence there, right? So let's go through the options for this. So it fails to specify which types of public transport are to be improved. It doesn't really matter. It's just saying the whole thing is about public transport in general. It's a generalized argument. It doesn't really matter for saying like you have to improve the buses. That's not really going to add anything, if you see what I'm trying to say. So it can't be this one. The counter arguments are not explained in detail. You don't really have to explain the counter arguments in detail here. Neither do you even have to explain why someone won't be willing to give up their car in this argument. It doesn't really add any substance. Think about it, guys. Sometimes it's good to think it in reverse. If we did add a counter argument, would it add anything really to the passage? No, not really. So that's why it can't be this one. The statistic presented may not be representative of the whole population. I think this is a very good one because the conclusion is very generalized, whereas the evidence is based on an area which has heavy traffic problems, right? So obviously in an area which has heavy traffic problems, they would back it, obviously, isn't it? So I think this is going to be the answer so far, but we'll go through the other options. So this is also a key thing we're seeing, guys. Make a link between the conclusion and the evidence. If the conclusion is generalized but the evidence is very specific, then you have a mismatch and you probably have a problem. Then that's going to be your flaw. Okay, and then it does not consider the 24% who would not prefer to use public transport. So it doesn't really add anything. We just need to know 24% don't want to use public transport. It doesn't really matter saying, like 12% want to go by car. The other 12% want to go by motorcycle. It doesn't really add anything again, isn't it? So it can't be this one. E, if those can explain how the public transport system can be improved. Again, even if it was to explain how it could be improved. It doesn't really add anything to the conclusion, right? So it can't be this one. So hopefully, guys, you can understand that C in this case is going to be a winner. C is going to be the correct answer. So hopefully, guys, that has made sense. And as always, we look forward to seeing you in the next video.